guest I'm very, very, very excited about. His name is Corey Fonville. I've been a fan for a long and I've been trying to track him down for a while, and we finally got to do this. So, you know what? I'm going to bring him on right now because I can't wait to get started.
Hey,
What's up?
what's
You
up, bro? How
good?
you doing, man?
I'm good. Fantastic because we're here. We're talking.
Yep.
Just you and me. The rest of the world isn't really here. So, whatever we say, it doesn't matter. They can't use it against us.
What's up, world?
Right? I know. I see people from Germany, San Francisco, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Utah. Lots of people chiming in already.
Nice.
Just so that people know, if you're just getting on now, we are going to answer some questions, but try to save them till closer to the 5:30 mark because we got a bunch of stuff we're going to go through just to educate you as much as possible. But you, Corey, you're in Baltimore, right?
Baltimore, Maryland.
Death Cab for Cutie has not been to Baltimore since 2001,
Dang.
as far as I can remember. And I was trying to think of this the other day and why that is. I feel terrible. But when I did a little research with our booking agent, from what he can recall, is that there was some kind of like band fight that happened in Baltimore, like not on stage, but like backstage. Like it was a real bummer. Like it was close to everyone just being like, "Man, I'm done. I'm out of here" for
Oh wow.
some reason.
Huh.
And I think that what I'm trying to do here today is ease my way back into Baltimore because
Hey,
when we
man.
do we do get the opportunity to go back out on the road again, you and me both. I really want to come out and see you face to face because
Yeah, yeah.
this online thing is great, but
It's not the
we
same,
had
bro.
such a brief moment last time I saw you in New York. Time just flew by. So, look, I want to hear more about your story. I know a lot of people do. Not everyone knows who you are.
Hmm.
Um, we just give me a short backstory. Like I'll just start with this, folks. This guy's been playing drums since he's 2 years old. What happened after that?
Man, well, you know, my dad just he's really big into music. So he's not a musician. Neither of my parents are. But we, had a bunch of music around the house. I mean, he loved fusion, funk, a lot of soul, a lot of Prince, Morris Day and the Time. He loved a
Mm,
lot of the acid jazz stuff that was coming out in the early '90s too, like Incognito, Jamiroquai, Brand New Heavies, the Brand New Heavies. Yeah, it was just a list, man, of a lot of dope bands, man. And so, he nurtured the talent. They bought me my first professional grade drum set when I was 6. It was a Mapex Saturn Pro.
I remember those, the
And it
little
was
ones, right?
no, it was a 5 piece, man, I think, and it was a
I thought all
22.
the sizes were like smaller.
I don't
Maybe
think
I'm wrong.
I just remember them being power toms.
So were you like up here?
Yeah, pretty much, man. I had the whole setup,
Wow,
and so I had the B8 Pros. Had to start somewhere, but that it helped me a lot, man. And we would just go upstairs into the room over the garage, and he would just put on records, and I would just put them big headphones on and just play. He'd put on anything, and I would just jam out.
man. I can hear in your playing every time how much you care about music. Like clearly you have a ton of facility, you have great chops, but when you play time, when I hear you play music, I hear music as a whole. I mean, I know that you you can sit down to other instruments like the keys and the bass. I've been watching some of the Instagram videos
Oh
you've
man,
been posting where you're playing instruments. It's super inspiring, but
thank you, man.
because you're thinking about music and the song as a whole, and because you're a band guy with Butcher Brown and you helped found that band, and you're spread out, you're working with Christian Scott, like you're really a diverse player. But at the core, it seems so much about that history of listening to music. It sounds like you're listening all the time. Um,
Yeah.
so just because there's people chiming on right now or just getting on board, some of these folks haven't heard you, although it looks like plenty of them have. That probably here to watch you. Really, the only reason I want to do this was to sit back and watch you play.
All right.
So, can you maybe we had talked a little bit ago about grooves that changed our lives, like
Hmm.
when we first heard a player or a song, and we were so infatuated with it that we had to learn that part. Can you think of something that
What
you
comes?
could play for us that is in that vein?
Yeah, man. Well, right now, what pops into my head is Babylon's Sister by Steely Dan. which is but I believe it's Bernard Purdy. And so I remember being like 6 or 7 years old, man, first grade, second grade, and my dad used to wear that stuff out. So it was like that and Peg and Caves of Altamira. I can't remember from Royal Scan, but anyway, Babylon's Sister was the first thing. So I'll play a little shuffle. Something like that.
So good, so laid back.
Thank you, man.
Dunn hired the hitman once again. So again, you've got a ton of facility. You could play that 4 times the speed, but you you understand that it's not. It doesn't sit the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's what I mean of the Death Cab fans that are on here, like Bernard Purdy, very famous session drummer.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of you probably heard a little bit of Grapevine Fires in there. It was definitely between Bernard Purdy and Jeff Porcaro
Mm-hmm.
for Rosanna, and from Toto, and also John Bonham's "Fool in the Rain." That I kind of arrived at my own shuffle version. Um, I'll play actually a little bit because some people haven't seen it up close, but I didn't. Where Corey was playing a shuffle on the right hand, the difference between what I'm doing with Grapevine Fires is I'm just playing quarter notes and the shuffle's happening between my left hand and my left foot. So it's like this. But obviously,
yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's
it's
cool.
in the same vein, right?
Yep,
Like
same
we
family.
we draw from history in a way that not. I mean, you got to listen to a lot of music, I think, to put together your thing. And once you've done that, then you launch off and you get further and further from that rear view mirror, I think. But like I said, I still hear so many influences in what you're doing. So you also play odd times really well.
Yeah, I
Fourth,
mean, it's been a while, but I tried to get there, man. Yeah, for sure.
well, if we want people to dance, it's usually 4/4. But you do a really good job of playing odd times and odd figures and adding a couple beats per bar.
Mm-hmm.
Forest Green, I think, is the first track I heard
Yeah.
from Butcher Brown that blew me away. Where there was an odd phrase.
Oh,
I
yeah,
can't. I don't even know if I counted it. Was it all
yes.
four, and then there's a measure of 6 or
Yeah, I
7?
think it's like ba-da, ba-da, ba-ba, ba-da, ba-da-da-ba-da-da. 1, 2, 3, 4, da-da. Oh, 1,
Yeah.
2, 3.
See,
I don't even think of it like that, man. I'm counting it in 4.
that's
but
but that's good. I mean, that's
yeah,
my point. Like,
yeah. Just listen for
one
the
other
melody.
groove. One other groove that kind of changed my life, since you provided one with Purdy, um, is this band, Talk Talk.
I'm not familiar with Talk Talk.
Most people know the '80s Talk Talk hits, but Talk Talk went way off the rails and
Okay.
sort of lost their minds and made this really two kind of challenging records, really beautiful, euphoric records. One was called Spirit of Eden, the other was called Laughing Stock. And when I first started Laughing Stock, I was playing in a jazz trio at the time, and the pianist played it for me. And I think I was maybe 18 or something like that. And man, it changed my life because of this one groove, which I didn't even think about was in 7
Mm-hmm.
until I tried to break it down and play it. I just heard it as something very consistent. I wanted to play it a little bit for people, and I wanted to ask you about some of your odd time grooves as well.
Okay.
But the groove was like this. The backbeat was perfectly placed in the middle and at the end of the beat, 3.5 beats apart. So it was always consistent. It sounded like a backbeat, but you didn't realize it was an odd time.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. sorry, vocal mic. The whole song was like that. It was
Yeah.
just mesmerizing, and I just wanted to sit in that groove. I didn't want to do any fills. I just wanted to keep on that thing. So you often, when I see you play, whether it's online or listen to your records, you sit in a pocket that's so deep it's like a pant leg. It's
Hey
like
man,
way down there. It's like
I try to stay at home, man.
I know, right? I mean, do you ever? Why is that? I mean, that's a conscious choice. Like,
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe I like to create the bed, when I'm playing with other people. I don't like
that's a
to
good
get in
way
the
to put
way.
it.
I want to be able to support. I believe it's important for drummers and just we're musicians too. It's cool for us to get our rocks off and play everything we know, but at the same time, we're trying to make some music. And I
Right.
love being able to kind of like just be the heartbeat, the battery behind everything, and allow for the other instruments to be able to like just create and build over top of it. And then when there's moments, I if I hear something that inspires me, I respond. But I think I'm a believer in waiting on those moments, versus trying to like force that thing. And
Patience.
yeah, patience, man. Patience is so important and vital. So like I try to, allow that to come to me and wherever whatever the spirit is doing that day, man, cool. If I'm not feeling it, and it could be killing, it could be extremely dope what's happening, but sometimes, man, I just want to sit there and just vibe out with the bass player and we're just kind of in the zone, rocking back and forth. And
Yeah.
I get off to that. And I love hearing like horn players, especially with Butcher, where we're in a situation where, we might just be grooving out, just rocking out for a good 5 minutes, and then boom, Marcus takes a saxophone solo, and we're just sitting there just rocking, and he's playing all this bad stuff on top of that, and it's almost like a mixtape, like a hip hop mixtape, beat tape, but with like some dope horn stuff happening. I imagine like what if Coltrane was playing over top of like some boom bap stuff? What would it sound like? But like it didn't move, like a Pete Rock beat or something. But I just love that approach. I mean, that's just who I am, man. At this point, I do appreciate the other way as well when you do have that syncopation element in there, where you're kind of dancing with the time. And I feel like there's a time and place for it. It still has to be funky and groove. Like for instance, when I hear
Feel free to play.
yeah,
Feel
yeah.
play that
So
examples for us.
so I think of like Zigaboo for instance from the Meters.
Oh, so good.
When he's grooving, it's like you know, just kind of dancing a little bit. It still has to move, man. You want people to move around, and like I like to feel it that way too. And so,
Absolutely. No, I never want to see. I never want to. When I picture drummers that really like resonate with me, it's not a fence board, right? It's
yeah,
something moving and shaking and shifting. There's a real personality.
right.
Zigaboo is a fantastic example. I mean, the dragon, he bite me. I mean, like, look a pie pie. I mean, there's so many good
Yep.
tracks from those guys.
James
Stanton's,
Black as well.
oh, James Black, incredible.
Yep. Stanton. Yeah.
Stanton's great. I mean, I think you got a Johnny Vidakovich. I
Vidakovich.
mean,
Yeah. That's where Blade came out of, man.
yeah, I know, right? Brian Blade is bucket list, man. He's a hero. I every
Yep.
time I see Brian, I'm reminded uh, how emotive he is as a player. Like
Yeah.
his
It's like
dynamic.
Elvin Jones meets
Oh,
this other. Yeah. I mean, and then his
amazing.
pocket is incredible too. People don't really
Well,
talk about it.
I know, right? Well, and for a lot of people who are listening, who are or watching, who are Death Cab fans, like a lot of the music Corey and I are talking about is probably not in your catalog. Maybe it is if you're really into music and digging deep and looking at all influences. But this is all the music we're talking about, all the Steely Dan records, all the
Hmm.
Meters records. Um, I mean, we both listen to these albums for information to help build our thing. I mean, I'm not competing with you in any way, man. I
Oh
think you got
no.
your own unique, amazing sound. But when I'm on tour and I want influence and sort of just to pick my head up outside of the tour treadmill, I'm constantly going out to clubs and trying to find small groups.
Hmm.
Like I'll go to the Blue Note. like I went to the Blue Note to hopefully catch you with Christian Scott, and it wasn't you, it was Joe Dyson, who's
Right.
also amazing. But
Yeah, yeah.
you two have a such a great feel together when you're playing together. Um,
I love Joe, man. That's my dude.
yeah, how did that happen? You know, the two drummer thing.
Well, I think when Christian, well, him and Christian go back. I mean, they're both from New Orleans. Joe is around my age. We're like both near 30. Um, about 7 years younger than Christian. So Joe has known Christian since he was like a little kid, like 10 or 11 years old. And then, of course, Joe turned like 13 or 14 and joined Donald Harrison's band, who's Christian's uncle. So, he's just been around him for a long time. And, I met Christian around the age of 16. And Joe and I have known each other since 14 or 15, and it was because of MySpace. uh,
What
just,
what's that? MySpace? What?
I know, right? MySpace,
Man,
man.
I'm the one who's older than you. I can't believe you brought that up as a
I know.
reference.
Shout out to Tom. But, we all the drum community, man, at that time was neat, man. We just found each other online and just became friends from there. And then when we all met, we clicked. And Joe was already amazing at that period. And so Christian had this idea, to have two drummers come on for a project, and it worked right away. It was
Do you recommend that? Some
um,
people get this wild idea that two drummers is the only way to go, but do you recommend that?
I think it's if they listen, if they can both work together. It's all about
Sure.
listening to each other, man. If you can work together, and you got to put whatever ego stuff to the side, because it's not about that in those moments. You have to make music, serve the music, and what makes the most sense in that moment. There's moments where I just lay out and I would just let Joe play. You know,
So fun.
you have to be willing to do that.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Definitely in the larger group you're in, you got to be
Yeah.
willing to play. I yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I don't have another drummer trying to creep up and play with my band yet, but if that happens, I'll be ready to lay out per your advice. Let's talk a little bit more about your approach to drumming. We talked about groove and listening and the importance of just being able to sit in it.
Hmm.
You have some great hands. You have some incredible facility. You actually work on that, or you don't think about it? Because some players, they just sit down and play. They've never
Hmm.
thought about it. They haven't taken a lot of lessons. Do
Hmm.
you put much thought in developing different techniques, your wrists, your fingers, your motions, all that stuff?
I definitely did at one point. I can't say that I focus too much on that now, but I started taking formal drum lessons when I was 5. I had a teacher. My first teacher was a guy named Larry Emanuel, where I grew up in Virginia. I grew up in Virginia Beach. I used to go to this store called A&M in Norfolk, Virginia. Every Saturday I had lessons. It was
Hmm.
maybe every other Saturday after baseball practice or something or a game. And my dad would take me up there, and he was a funk guy. He was really into like Steve Ferrone, and that's where I discovered
Of
Steve Ferrone.
course,
Was another bad
average
news.
white band.
Exactly. So he taught me up until 8, and then eventually I moved on to another guy named Rich Mossman, and he was like the technician guy. And at that point, I was like, this is boring. But that's when he started drilling the whole idea of the drum pad, and like he had me draw. We drew like a little quarter in the middle and the center of the pad, and I can't remember the exact name of the technique, but he would deal with the fingers. Big on the finger technique, and I would just sit there doing pretty much the entire lesson. And it was not fun at all. And like I would alternate. And I'm like 9 years old, and I'm like, man, this is boring. I want to go home and watch Hey Arnold or something. But it's cool. I mean, but it definitely taught me something. And I would go home and sit down with it for like maybe 30 minutes at a time. I was a pretty bad student, I must say. But I did take something away from it because it taught me how to relax. And I'd never had bad technique, thankfully. Like I use mostly wrist and fingers, kind of a combination of both.
Hmm.
But I'd say, one thing I got from that was just, being relaxed and not, using too much energy to get a sound, to get in, I think his whole philosophy was like allowing the stick to do the work.
I use that quote all the time.
Yeah.
I think that was a major eye-opening moment for me.
Hmm.
I've talked about it on a couple of other episodes, but the fact that this stick, whether you hit it once,
Hmm.
twice, three times, four, five, like it'll keep going, right? If you
Yep.
let it do the work. If you get, Dave Elitch always says, get out of your own way,
Yep.
which he's talking about not just the stick in the hand, but a lot of people are hip to this. But Dave's thing is not just the hands, but mental and your
That's a,
posture and
people
all
don't talk
things. But
about the mental part of this too. Like the
no,
whole,
it's huge,
that's
man.
something that people miss. I talk about it sometimes when I teach, some lessons, and you know, that's a part of this whole thing that has been missed, and just how to be relaxed, how to like just block out certain things, because we've all had moments where you're like, I want to play this super killing drum fill that I've been shedding at home, and then you try to play it in a gig context and it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
and it's because you're too much in your thoughts and you're not focusing on what's important at this moment, which is the music and the band and that environment.
Oh man, for sure. Your brain is lifting weights when it's thinking about too much. It just
Yeah,
can't.
exactly.
It can't support your limbs after that. That is, for people that are listening or watching who are on tour, some of you, we have talked about this. I have talked about this with Benny Greb at
Hmm.
length. I've talked about this with Jarris, our friend. We've
Yeah.
talked about this with nearly every professional drummer, Aaron Spears,
Yep.
yourself, like Vinny Colaiuta. I mean, there's a number of players who are out there who, from the outside perspective, think that they're just doing everything effortlessly. But I still think it's constant work for you and I
Hmm.
to get out there and play, whether you're in a studio or on a stage, or doing this thing live on video. Where if you don't fully relax this, like that's the filter that everything has to go through. It's not
Yeah.
if this is not transparent,
Hmm.
then none of what you're trying to accomplish will be either. And I'm
Exactly.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because it is a huge part. I mean, I would say it's more than half of it,
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, it's kind of like somebody once said, like with sports, it's it's 50% like physical and then 50 mental. I feel like it's sort of the same concept with drums.
Joe Madden, famous coach Joe
Oh yeah.
Madden. I heard this great podcast at one point in time. I can't remember who it was with, but he talked about this American Legion Day where
Hmm.
all the baseball players came back out, and because you played baseball, right?
Yeah.
So, but he talked about this day off season where he had all the players come out to the field and just kind of kick the bench and shoot the shit and like play a loose game. And he claimed that it's the best baseball he's ever seen any of them play because none of them were thinking about it. They weren't mid-season, they weren't
Hmm.
overtrained, they were coming from vacations with their families. They were just in good spirits and they were really happy to see each other.
Yep.
And I mean, if
That's
anything,
so funny.
this
Reminded me of something.
this time period right now where all of us don't have a choice but to take this great pause,
Hmm.
as I read,
Yep.
um, it's really, I think it's going to help a lot of people out as much as some of us are hanging our heads and it's financially difficult.
Hmm.
I do see this as a real opportunity to reset and work on some things and find some refuge in
That's right.
this practice.
For sure.
um, I want to get in because time is going to fly by here.
I
I want to
know.
talk about studio and choices for
Okay.
sounds. I know that you have a couple snare drums on the floor,
Hmm.
and I know that I've made a big effort every record I've made with whomever to make sure that the choice of my snare drum or my hats or whatever the kit is, that properly informs the groove in the song. It changes the way we think, as you said earlier today when we were speaking. But
Yeah.
people have heard these drums. um, let's both you and I play just a simple, like, just give them a.
So that's the high pitch. My little.
Right, same thing. I think you and I are playing a similar drum right now. Same
Yep.
depth. This one's brass. That one might be steel.
Still. Yep.
Um, but now, oddly, Corey and I have the same super cheap snare drum. Mine happens to have a felt strip in the middle of it. My bandmate Zach Ray, old Grumpy Beard, got this thing for $50 somewhere.
Hmm.
Someplace, some pawn shop. I don't know where. Music store. Anyway, I have not changed anything about the tuning. Uh, it's kind of set for stun, and it's perfect. $50, and this drum makes me think and feel differently whenever I sit down to play. Corey has the same thing. I don't think his is as dry and muted as mine. But anyway, here's what this thing sounds like. And if I dry it up just a little bit more, sounds sick. Totally different.
So here
Or
is a yeah.
anyway, I'd rather hear you play your drum.
Oh man, no. This is a 1967 Yamaha. It came with this D20 drum set I got, Black Oyster, and has an inserted mute 5x14. So check this out. You know,
Sick.
a little deeper, but tune it up a little bit. Yeah, it's still very warm and kind of tight and dry. It's a very dry snare. So it slightly changes up the way I think and just like the decisions that I probably would make, versus
Agreed.
the stainless
Agreed.
steel.
Um, Also, some drums I think make you play harder. Some
Yeah,
drums make you play quieter. Do you have another drum there
I
we can
do.
talk about?
Yep.
I have one more myself. Sorry to bore y'all non-drummers with gear talk here, but this is important. This is why when someone says whatever you're playing through the song isn't quite right, often that refers to a sound.
The snare, man, it's very important.
So
So what are you playing?
so this is a 1937 Ray McKinley Slingerland Radio King. And I found it at a music store I was working at called Trading Musician in Seattle. At the time, it was like tucked way back in a shelf. I was repairing drums, and this thing was just like in pieces, like the tension rods weren't on it or anything. And I put it back together, brought it to life, and it's made it on several records. I've had it since maybe 1996,
Okay,
and
yeah.
currently it has the Bovid goat skid heads on top and bottom. The guy sent them to me to try out. I am a Remo guy
Hmm.
for everything I do on tour and everything, but in the studio, I do like to use different options for heads, and so sometimes the goat skin kit is the way to go.
Yeah.
But it makes me play totally different. This drum also has an internal mute.
Man, those are my favorite.
Internal mutes, or you mean goat skin?
Well, the mutes. I haven't tried the ghost skin, man. I got to check that out now.
Yeah, this drum is really sounds very. I don't know what it's gonna sound like. Oops, across the internet here, but very. I don't know. It's got that slinky. Or just quiet sound, ringy. You can dry it up. So what else you got there?
Kind of has like a field sound, like a field snare
You're right.
kind of vibe.
Probably because of the goat skin.
Yeah, that would make sense. So what I'm playing on here is I believe it's a 6x14 Yamaha hybrid maple snare drum. So I have just a Evans G1 head on it right now, Cody. And to me, this one has a bit more ring to it, which will again, I think, change my approach slightly because I'll start playing around with the ring sound, depending on how I'm feeling. So, We'll see what happens. And even when I play pocket, kind of more just straight 4/4. Has a little bit more dirt, in my opinion.
Man, that sounds amazing. I mean, you sound amazing. You sound inspired no matter what. And that ring is something that let's talk about ring. Let's talk about drum tone for a
Let's talk
second.
about it.
In this world of programming, when the
Mhm.
majority of what you hear on the radio or so many tracks is programming and sampled sounds, there's not a lot of ring. There's a lot of really dry, tight, like drum sounds in your face.
Mhm.
I know that some of the records you made with Christian Scott, you're playing an 808 trigger bass drum, but maybe the top of the kit is live, real.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah.
So, I mean, how what's your opinion on the future of drumming and like us moving forward? Like, obviously, you need to lose the ego, whatever the artist wants to hear, however the song needs to be framed in order to be right
Mhm.
is what we go with. But in your opinion, if you were a producer, if you're making records and you were going to make choices about drums that ring that are tuned wide open versus maybe program sounds that are dry and tight and right in front of your face. Like, what's your take on that?
Um, I have a feeling if we're talking about like, we're forecasting what's going to happen, it seems like it's going to be a hybrid of all of those things, in my opinion. I think, at least for me, I want all of those sounds. I think we should have all the feels. I like all the different ear candy, just depending on the particular song that you're in the vibe that you're going for. And I like the tight sound for certain things. Like I love gaff tape. It's like my best friend, man.
Yeah, right.
And I use it especially, for the tight, stuff with Butcher, for like hip hop music, and even for the detune stuff, that's like more 70s driven. I don't know. It just kind of depends. But, I can see why people dislike Ring, especially in the studio. Sometimes it bugs me just depending on the drums. It just depends on the drums, in my opinion. I'm not an engineer by any means, but I think the best ones can make anything work. And it's about work. If you have a trained ear for sonics and you know what you want, like Steve Jordan, for instance, I mean, he can
Oh,
sound like a
amazing.
drummer straight out of 1963
Yeah.
and then turn it on and sound really current. Chris Dave is the same way. I mean, there's so many. But I think we're going to have a combination of everything. And I'm seeing, especially now, we're in a very beat driven time period, with like Mark Giuliana and beat music, um,
Yeah.
Nate Smith,
Oh, so good.
Zach Danziger, who's kind of the OG with that whole sound, Adam Deitch, and
You're
the list
talking
goes
about the
on.
whole Zildjian Underground
Kind of,
night.
sort of, man. Those are all
That
my
was the
guys.
best. That was so good.
But like it, those cats they resonate with me, man. And I remember hearing Zach Danziger with Mr. Barrington, the stuff he was doing, I think with like Owen Biddle and Ollie Rockberger, and I was like, I've never seen anything like that before in my life. And but just the whole, and oh yeah, JoJo Mayer, come on,
Oh yeah, I know. I know.
and
That's who I was
yeah,
listening to before.
that's a head scratcher. I mean, technique, feel, everything. I mean, the dude has it down. Nerve is
I
dope.
know.
So
Yeah.
I feel like it's up to us to really kind of drive that forward. We need to just have the knowledge of what sounds good. And I think it'll determine what's hot and what's gonna come next. If that
Happy
makes
to know
sense.
we're driving. um, people are. I want to get to some of these questions. Um, can you see any of the questions on the right hand side of your screen?
I do not.
You don't have those. I wonder
Let me
how
see.
to
Hold
turn
on
on
one
those
sec.
comments.
Oh, you know what? Here we go. Yeah, I had it on private chat.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So some of these questions, like I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way back up. How tight do you guys go on your tom heads? For me, the smaller the drum, usually the tighter the tuning, the bigger the drum, the looser or the lower the tuning.
Hmm.
But again, it's genre specific. And it also has to do with tempo. If I'm
Hmm.
playing a really slow track, I tend to want drums to last a long time, lots of sustain, low tuning. If I'm playing a fast track, I tend to crank those things up. What about you?
I can say very much, pretty much the same. For jazz, if I'm playing on an 18-inch kick drum and playing some bebop or hard bop, I'm tuning the drums a little higher. The kick drum is going to be a little higher, open bass drum sound. Um, Probably not going to have the snare tune quite as high. It's probably going to be more around the range of this one, you know, because I like it for like the buzz rolls and the different language that I'm going to try to play. But I like my drums kind of tuned deeper and kind of more with that throaty sound. I'm all for that. Just very pointed and kind of get in, get out. But it still just depends on the band, the music that I'm playing. I change it up often. Sometimes
All
it
right.
requires me to change my heads.
What about your favorite hi hats? What about you?
Um, these days, man, I'm using 16-inch hi hats.
Yes. I'm
You
using
know,
15s. I got
15s are
16s.
yeah,
I mean, those inform the groove as much as a snare drum choice for
yeah.
sure. Like the spread for me, it's all about like foot chick. Like the faster this is,
Uh huh.
it's all about that left foot like sort of speed
Right.
and spread. Like when you really want to.
Yeah, I love the smokiness in having those
Yeah,
16s, and I think the smallest I'll ever go now is 15s. And what I like about them,
yeah.
what I like about these hi hats is that yeah, it's the same thing. The only thing I'll say is sometimes an issue is if I have to play some jazz,
Mm,
they don't have the best chick, I guess, depending, in
right.
moments, for instance. But it also is dependent on the hi hat stand too. You know,
You're right, man. That's
I've
amazing you
had some
said
bad
that.
luck.
No, 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 no. It's true. There are. I'm not gonna like call anybody out, but hardware and the weight of your hardware, or the tension of your hi hat spring, or how your hi hat pedal specifically works. I mean, I think you have to play for a while to be that intuitive or that picky about it. But
Yeah,
even the clutch, the weight of a clutch,
exactly.
um, I think there's a really fine balance to getting it just right. And there are some grooves that I can play with these 15-inch hats and this clutch that I can't play with the 16s or the old 13s or something. It's
Yeah,
really, I mean, it's I feel like we're putting tires on a car that's going around a track. Like
right.
it's turn specific.
No, for
And
sure. I mean, it's just like the snare drum, man. You know how it changes your approach.
yeah, do you play? I noticed your bass drum. You had no front head
Hmm.
on your bass drum. I'm playing a double-headed kick drum. Why do you play a single-headed kick drum?
I think I'm just experimenting a little bit, man. I think right now I like the way the kick drum sounds without a front head. And I think something happened back in January. Butcher Brown had a show in LA at this place called the Mint, and a friend of mine named Harry let me borrow his. It was like this interesting kit, but it had no bottom heads, and that was my first time playing on a kit live with no bottom heads, and I really loved the way the drum sounded. So I think that just triggered something in me to do this, and I've just been sticking with it since. And I'm loving the sound that I get. It's very punchy. I have some pillows inside of it to just kind of tighten the sound up, but I plan on experimenting and putting on the front head again soon. I don't know when. I'll probably will just wake up one day and just decide, hey, let me
Right.
put it back on and see where it goes.
I think that not enough people experiment with different drum sounds. It's a hell of a lot of work to take your front bass drum head on and off. So
Yeah.
obviously, it's nothing we do like on a daily basis. But
Hmm.
um, I have a question for me. Someone's asking what kit, snare, cymbals are you using on Blue Bloods in DCFC? Also, what studios you recorded at? We recorded at Peter Cadis' studio in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Mm.
That EP, we just did two songs with them, Kids of '99 and Blue Bloods. And um, the drum set is there's two snare drums. There's a 5-inch snare drum in the rack tom position, and there's a 10-inch marching snare drum with a towel over it uh, in the main snare drum position. I'm using a mallet with one hand and like a hot rod with the other, or a Vic Firth, whatever, multi rod.
Hmm.
And if you look hard enough, there is some footage on it. I'm not going to give an example of it today, but the drum set is an old Ludwig '60s club date because it was the house kit for that studio. Also, the same drum set that the National uses, that Brian uses with the National a lot of the time, which brings to mind like the idea of certain studios and certain instruments that live places. When you go there to record, you go there for those reasons.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if some of the studios you've been in have had like a legendary piece or an instrument that sort of speaks. Like you hit it or you play it or you lay down some chords and you're like, that's that sound.
There's a studio in Richmond, Virginia that we did Butcher did one record there, but we have this guy named Adrian Olson who mixes all of our records.
Hmm.
He has this killing old board. It's the Flickinger board, and it's I guess it's one of five boards that was made, and his board is the original one that the Ohio Players used on all those records. And so, I think for me, it's like, wow, we're getting a piece of that energy, when we go in there, or either when we have him mix the album. So it's something like that, and then obviously, there's other studios like there's a studio in New Orleans called the Parlor that has a very special vibe too. You go in there and it just puts you in the right mood.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Makes you happy, man. Um, sorry, I was reading also. Someone asked about phrasing, our thought process when it comes to phrasing.
Mm.
When we go on tour playing drums or whether we're playing jazz, contemporary jazz locally, like when you're at home, does your thought process change? Like for me, when I'm on a big stage and I'm on tour, obviously I'm playing the parts that I've written for the songs, and
Hmm.
we don't. I mean, there are moments in the set where there's a little more improvisation, but for the most part, I'm trying to nail my parts,
Hmm.
and I'm not trying to fill too much space because I realize the rooms are big and there's a lot of people on stage. When I'm in a smaller club, it's been a while, but when I'm playing in a smaller setting, then it's a little more of a free conversation for
Yeah.
me. And so phrasing is much looser. You?
Um, for jazz context, like straight ahead, I think of phrasing because I pay attention to what the piano player or horn player is doing, and I've
Hmm.
taken a lot of those elements and tried to apply it to the drum set. The amount of space that they leave, just little things. Taking a bar off, not having to comp with the left hand every bar, maybe taking the break with the left foot. Now with backbeat stuff, with the stuff that I'm doing more these days, I'm just kind of grooving out, man, and trying to lock in. And I love the approach of sort of thinking like a producer in a live context, and taking that same energy that you would have there and applying it, on the stage. Obviously you're going to be slightly more free, but I really enjoy the way that sounds, especially when I go back and listen to a live recording. And I'm like, damn, I didn't play a lot. I kind of stayed out of the way, and like less is more sometimes in those moments for me personally.
I agree. Um, do you have? I can keep going down some of these questions, but we're going to run out of time before it too long. Do you have any questions for me? I've been asking you a lot of questions.
Oh man. Well, actually, yeah, I'm kind of just curious about how you like. Where did you get your start? Like, did you start jazz? Did you start funk, or like, what's your background, man?
I have been an imposter my whole life. No, I You know what? I was always the kid in school that seemed to get along with every group of people, whether it was people playing sports, people hanging out in long trench coats over by the smoke pit,
Same here, man. Yeah.
or the people who were super proud to get a letter for band and
Right.
get their Letterman's jacket just based on the little lyre or harp that they put on their sleeve. Like
Hmm.
I played jazz band, I played jazz choir, but I started when I was 11, snare drum, sixth grade,
Okay.
sixth, seventh, eighth grade. Didn't get to start when I was two. I
Yeah,
might
man.
sound different if I got to start when I was two, like you. My folks were playing Fifth Dimension records
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Beatles and Beach Boys and stuff like that. Mamas and Papas. Um, so I was listening to a lot of Hal Blaine without knowing.
Oh, yeah.
But I then, after high school, I had the opportunity to go play in college, but I didn't want to study all the different orchestral stuff. I just wanted to find a good drum teacher or two, and that led me to the Seattle Drum School, where I was a student for a year, and then I ended up being a teacher there, and started taking on students. And I didn't join Death Cab until I turned 28.
Hmm.
So from the time I was 19 to 28, I did all kinds of different gigs, everything from Paul Simon cover bands, learning Steve Gadd grooves,
Yeah.
to jazz gigs with Medeski Martin Wood type,
Yep.
trios, to funk nights in Seattle, to country bands, like all kinds of stuff. And then a few weird little, I had this indie rock, prog rock androgynous trio. It was
Hmm.
that where I actually sang and played all kinds of odd times. And I realized that that stuff was fun for me, but it didn't really, it wasn't a gig that was going to pay bills.
Yeah.
And I was working at yeah, I was working in drum shops, I was teaching lessons, and I was trying to gig and practice with multiple bands.
Yeah.
And when the Death Cab opportunity came around, I just seized the moment and was kind of rather bold and just said, "You guys should use me for your next record."
Boom. I
And
love that, man. You can hear the story in your playing. You know, you
uh,
hear all these different influences, so
oh,
that's really
thanks,
cool.
man.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I learned just enough of each of those influences to fake it, but I'm still trying to find my own. I guess what I do is Death Cab, and that's that's what the world hears most of the time. But there are other projects floating around out there that people, if they could find something out of print, would probably be like, "Wow, that's him."
Right.
Doesn't
That's
seem
always the
like
best,
that's where he
man.
comes from, but
Yeah.
it was definitely a big soup, you know.
Hmm.
Uh, and what else? I'm trying to think of what. Is there anything we talked about beforehand that we were going to bring up that we didn't bring
Oh
up?
man, I'm trying to think. I feel like we covered so much stuff, man. We covered a lot of ground.
I will say this. Wait, also intro for Highway One reminds me of so much Elvin Jones
Oh wow.
origin.
So that's
Wonder if you had that in mind when you wrote that tune.
um, I didn't write that tune, but I appreciate it. So that song is from the first Butcher Brown album called All Purpose Music, and it's essentially just a bossa nova. Um, I guess it's kind of swung a little bit, which may have triggered him to say that. But it was essentially just, and I literally just sat on that for probably like 4.5 minutes, and
That feels so good though.
we,
That's somewhere, that's not like straight calibrated samba bass drum beat. That has a swing to it in itself.
yes,
That's somewhere between that swung and straight feel.
pensativa. Um, it has that feel. I think that's Art Blakey. Man, the Jazz Police are going to kill me. I can't remember the name of this song, but I think it's pensativa. But that's probably where I heard it, and yeah, just kind of swinging it a little bit. I love everything to kind of have a little bit of that sideways thing happening. I don't like it to be straight on the grid.
All right, name this tune.
Janelle Fournier, Louisiana.
Right. So here we are. We're talking about Ahmad Jamal. I'm in an
Boom.
indie rock band. Like, this is where I
I
come
mean,
from. This is why I appreciate so much of what you play, is because we're, you know, a Love Supreme is in our record collect, both of us,
yeah,
right? And a
no, for
lot of
sure.
people don't realize that influences come from all over the place. And one of my bandmates has been doing a great cocktail hour Instagram live from time to time and putting on great jazz records. And
Hmm.
man, I just think that we all need to look back as much as possible at times where things were really different and there were massive movements and change. And I think that this is one of those times. I look forward to hearing everything you're writing all the time. Whenever I see a new
Thank you, man.
post of music, it inspires me. I think everybody is really tuned in to what is happening in music right now, regardless of the rest of the world, mostly because it makes us happy.
Yeah.
So I think we should wrap it. Big shout out to everybody for tuning in, especially from all the way over from New Zealand, Brazil. I mean, people have been listening all around the world and watching this fine drummer here, Corey Fonville. Um, thank you so much for taking the time to do this,
Oh man, it's been my pleasure, bro.
and I will continue to watch you.
I'm
Thanks
gonna
to
do the
everybody.
same. I got some research to do now too, man.
Oh yeah,
Thank you
no,
for having me, man.
of course, and big shout out to everybody that is working so hard to take care of the sick people out there. Um,
Yes.
I think that calluses on our hands are nowhere near as impressive that as the calluses and bruises that I see on people's faces from masks and stuff. So
Yep.
I hope that you and all your friends and family are healthy. And thanks everybody once
Same to
again for
you,
working
man.
so hard and tuning in.
Y'all stay safe.
All right, thank you.